staying attuned, a poetic gaze, backwards and forward, with folks both brilliant and humble.
If you're going to create something today. Do not think about it until tomorrow. And tomorrow is the soonest time that you can be critical. But you can't be critical in the same day.
A man of many, a purposeful creator, inspires faithful. Our guest today is Victor Lytvinenko. He is a fashion designer and co-founder of Raleigh Denim Workshop with his wife, Sarah. Like all our guests, he is many other things too, and we will dive into that now. I'm going to read you a poem called Your Favorite Self. I read somewhere on Instagram that we should try to be our favorite self because it seems that best self might be a little too high of a bar, maybe unrealistic, maybe unattainable. I like this reformatting. It makes semantic sense. And I like that the slight difference might encourage one to think of their favorite people and then model their favorite self, not entirely on one person. No, that would make no sense. But instead to create a collage from little scraps of favorite parts of people littering their histories.
Littering? I was thinking about fireflies. I was thinking about like light bulbs and energy, and like littering is interesting. I like that word.
Yeah, I think there's sort of a negative connotation to litter, right?
Totally.
But I hear it's generally a positive connotation, just talking about the sort of what's left over from any relationship or any experiential conversation or time together is something that ideally you could build a narrative around of maybe, at least a characteristic of that person that maybe you want to be more like.
Do you know the definition of litter? I don't. I was just wondering what that is.
Yeah, let's look that up. Make a place untidy with rubbish or a large number of objects left lying about.
Huh.
Yeah.
Will you read the last two sentences again? Or two lines?
Yeah. Not entirely on one person, no, that would make no sense, but instead to create a collage from little scraps of favorite parts of people littering their histories.
Where did this poem come from?
Yeah, quite verbatim, I saw that on Instagram and I just thought about your best self, and that's a pretty, like I said, high bar, and it's ultimately open to interpretation, but often is filled by someone's prescribed notion of what your best self should be. You should be have this salary, live here, do this, do that.
I don't know.
Well, no, that's what I'm afraid, right? Is what people allow others to prescribe what their best self is. And so to me, it's just, your favorite self. What are the characteristics that you like in others, and maybe that's really who you should strive to become.
That's really cool. Where were you when you wrote this poem?
It's on the toilet in my house. No, because it's, what you do, I guess, is you get on Instagram when you're, sitting there. And what I find myself doing is doing either an email, a text, probably not a voice recording, but yeah, Instagram a lot. And I just love that I saw that and I got right off it and I wrote a poem, and completely unedited, just probably by the time I flushed, it was done. Not probably, it was. The poem was over. But so that's kind of like what I was thinking. Nothing too grand, but I'm interested. Like, I remember hearing this concept back in Washington, D.C. when I lived there in like 2010. And I think it was from an ex-girlfriend or a current girlfriend who would become an ex-girlfriend. And she talked about all the exes before and gave this idea of kind of like like these scraps. So like that one, Def Leppard t-shirt that, she wore to bed that was his, that she still has. Mm-hmm. It could be like physical objects or it could be ideas. But the idea is simply like the litter, like I said, is kind of probably a controversial choice there. But I guess I'm interested in like what you know of about relationships, sort of in their impact on you throughout your history of relationships with different people.
Yeah. Huh. There's a lot there. There's a lot to think about. I'm coming around to liking the word litter in that a lot. I think it's really interesting. One, because it made me feel something, and it made me think about those things that are like left over from past relationships, past friendships, past relationships with myself, Sarah and I have been together since the 1900s, and it's like, so I've only had like one romantic relationship for most of my life. But we have had multiple relationships within that. So it's interesting to think of like who I was, who she was, who we were at different times, and like which parts of that are interesting. I love the idea of the collage, and that it's like editing. I feel like when I make physical things, I'll like make a lot of things and I'll put them up, or we'll shoot videos or photos or make clothes and then look at each one, and I love to like go back and say like I love that part, like, and like be able to like zoom into like a 2-inch by 2-inch spot on a jacket that I made and say like I love that part, and like to think of that as a separate. I think this poem is making me think of those things as separate little cutouts of like, oh, here's the little piece of that, oh, here's the little piece of that, here's the piece of that. And it could be color, it could be shape, it could be texture, it doesn't even need to be like the whole composition. It's like, is there something there that's a seed that I can plant over here and let grow again? I think it's really interesting. And I also am finding myself thinking a lot about best and favorite as, it's like the word best is almost gross. I think because it's tainted by these other things. Like, I think that's what you were saying before. And favorite implies so much more choice.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a very different thing. And so I'm interested in like you've been going through huge transitions with yourself, right? And your like internal, like who are you? Who's your best self? Who's your favorite self? Yeah. Like this feels like this poem's cool because it's like a thing that everyone does every morning, and they see that dumb shit on the internet, on Instagram, and it's like, oh, but like, it's much deeper, and it's, I'd love to know how you're, I don't know, there's...
Yeah, I'm obviously happy to talk about that. I think for me, like, as someone who's newly in recovery, I'll start there and just say, like, when I got sober, basically, I looked at a room full of addicts, substance abusers, alcoholics, and the key component is sort of like there's a mantra or sort in the introduction of a meeting that says, if you like what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, you've come to the right place. Mm-hmm. And so that idea of looking at what people have that I want, and just solely like taking recovery, for example, like I had a sponsor first when I got in there, had 52 years of sobriety.
Wow.
Right? And that is just an immense amount of time. So that's like, it's not necessary to see changes only after 52 years. Like ideally people see them in the first 3 months, first year, first 5 years. But they say essentially, like, if you do these things, like, again, if you like what we have, here's some suggestions for how to get what we have. And that's probably like financial security, that's probably, greater mental health, that's probably a better relationship with a romantic partner, lovers, friends, wives, husbands, whomever. So I think for me, it's like, this sort of humility that I realize I actually at 38 didn't have my favorite self. And in fact, for, I guess 22, 24 years, like I had been losing myself when trying to find myself. And maybe like I should just start modeling myself on others, like take a humble breath. And there's a certain meta aspect to this because, of course, the reason I want to talk to you on this episode is because, like, I pay very close attention to what you do. And again, as I said in there, not to model after one person. That's like a clone and that's boring. But to actually sort of like dig in the earth and be an archaeologist a little bit.
Totally.
And sort of like have ideas shaped, reformatted, enriched by other people gives you, maybe your more final self, So that's that. I don't know how that resonates with you or what you think.
It's interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
How do you,
Oh, no. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, sorry.
I just wanted to get back to what you were talking about with multiple sort of relationships that you've had with your wife since you guys were, high school sweethearts, right? Can you talk a little, that's a really foreign concept to me at first, right? Because I've been with my wife for 5 years and many partners before that, which makes that sort of litter rubbish pile, a lot sort of more fruitful or bigger, so to speak. But I'd love to hear a little bit more just on that idea of how one has multiple relationships in the span of a relationship.
Sarah and I have been together for like a very, very long time. And one morning she came down, like I got up first and she came down and I had made some coffee and I handed her the coffee and I said, we had this like very long in-depth conversation the night before. And I just like looked her in the eyes and I was like, I am exactly who I was yesterday and I'm not. and she was like, okay, cool. And I didn't say it like that forcefully, but I think about it, like I started thinking about it and like unwinding that over and over and over and over and over and thinking about how like in our minds, I think we oftentimes think, like I think of you based on my last interaction with you. But a lot of time has gone by.
Yeah.
And you've learned a lot of things since then, and you're not the same person, and I'm not the same person, and
right.
It's like I'm totally who you thought I was, and I'm not. And there's like the curiosity of like waking up every morning and saying, what's going on in there?
Yeah.
Like what's happening in there? And it's like we are changing like every single second, right? And every single day, and it's so fun to continue doing that. I was like realizing that like I think about like all the things that you can like want or buy or get or do in life, and like the things that you can't buy are the things that you can't. And one of the things is history. You can't make new history. Like you can make new friends, you can't make old friends. And so one of like the most valuable things to me is like somebody who knew me when I was in middle school or in elementary school or in high school or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I think that connection with Sarah is one of the most, like, we know each other more intimately than any other relationship in the world.
Yeah.
And we've changed and we've grown and we've like tried things and explored and failed and succeeded together, alone, like, or, and so it's like, it's different every day.
Yeah.
It's not that there's been like 3 different specific relationships. It's like, it's almost different every single day. And that's...
And you would say that reset of going into REM or, falling asleep is that sort of like, okay, it's just one other Victor, one other Sarah?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about the idea? I mean, again, a very different experience. I had a high school girlfriend, right, who, quickly, after a year and a half, was not my girlfriend anymore. Certainly never became much more of any kind of relationship. And we don't really have one now, right, or at all. Last time I talked to her, I don't know when, but I guess my question is really, like, coming back to this notion of, like, is someone's choice to involve themselves so intimately tied to, what do you think about this idea of, like, anticipating what that person's future self is going to be? So, like, basically, I guess the question is more like, for one to get involved, are they simply saying, I want one more day with this? I'm betting on tomorrow? Or do you think they're betting on a much further trajectory of many tomorrows?
I mean, I think it's different for everyone.
Yeah. But what do you think is going to lead someone to be the most, I don't know, I'm just keep coming back to the idea of such a long relationship. And that, as you said, was the most intimate relationship on this world, which is your world and her world. Yeah. Right. But, like, I guess I'm just trying to understand a little bit more of the ingredients that wisdom, eggs of knowledge you would crack on my head about it. Just, and we can move on.
Well, I don't know if I have eggs of knowledge. Like, I think it's...
Okay, just your experience.
I think it is one day at a time. And I think it's like... Yeah. I don't know. It's like I have faith in her and I have faith in us. And I learn from her and I'm curious. And I think as long as that's there, I want to see what tomorrow brings. I want to see what tomorrow brings. And that's been 25 years now.
Yeah,
But I think it does distill down almost to just one day at a time.
Yeah. No, that's really beautiful. And I guess coming back to your art, right? And tell me if I'm classifying what you do professionally and otherwise as art. I see it that way.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. With regard to your art, can you talk a little bit about those sort of like things littering the history that have influenced, right, what you're making at any one moment, or what guides those sort of like ideas?
What guides the ideas of my art?
Yeah, the present, but like what was the collage, talking about the collage that came before, can you spot certain things like in a jacket you made recently or in something you were doing here on the farm where you're like, actually that came, like, as you said, zoom in to that piece and like really investigate and be like, that's a historical like relic.
Totally. I mean, every single one is for me. Like they're all like a challenge to an idea or they're all challenges to ideas. I think a lot of my art is about challenging my own notions of what I've done or what I do or why I do it. And so anytime I can pinpoint something, it could be like the way that I'm actually stitching something or cutting something or shaping something. It could be more philosophical. It could be like why or how. And I think I've kind of come full circle over the last maybe 25 years of my life. In that, like, I can remember being in high school and being in my early 20s just making things because I like to make things, and I would make a thing every single day, and the churn of that was really interesting. And like there wasn't really a purpose other than like it was almost a meditation for me to do a thing, and I didn't care if it was good or bad or right or wrong, and I didn't show it to anybody, and I didn't claim to be an artist, and I didn't anything other than do the thing. And then I think I got like a critical lens as I was learning craft. And then I was like wanting to squeeze to the top, whatever, like the highest percentile that I could of what can I do and what, like, can I make the quote unquote best thing? Can I make quote unquote the most I don't know, or be recognized in the top tier of a certain thing. Like, can I play in the NBA in that thing? Like, and now I've kind of like, and so that was like, it was like, no, 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 no. And now I'm like kind of circling back to yes, yes, yes. So it's like I'm breathing in again, maybe, or out, I don't know. But every single piece I'm making now is a challenge to an idea that I've placed upon myself, or that I feel has been placed upon myself, and kind of like breaking free of boundaries, where I was like making boundaries to say I am this, I am this, I am this, I am this, and now I'm like, well, what's the opposite of that? And what's the distance between here and there? And and they are, I mean, if we flip through all the pieces I've made in the last couple of years, like every single one has a reason. I'm like, I did this, and like every single one is a diary entry.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Like where I was and what the ideas were and the reason and what I learned and how it influenced the next one. And it's been a evolution.
Yeah, one of the things you talked about that was really interesting to me was your high school sort of like, as you said, you were making. You weren't even sharing or calling yourself an artist. You were just honing a craft. And so, like, I guess for myself even, certainly for myself, for others listening, it's like there's so much, there seems to be so much to success that is not really thinking about it too much, it's just doing it. But can you talk about like when, like how did that evolve from being a craft up to a sort of pinnacle of that craft to then circling around and wanting to do, I guess, calling yourself an artist and doing that?
It's very, I think about breathing, and I think about like if it's become a compulsion, so it's not a choice. I'm not like choosing. I am choosing to make time to do these things, but if I don't do these things, then I don't feel alive. I don't feel human. I feel like rotten, and it's a meditation. I think about like the mandalas and like making a sand beautiful thing and then washing it away, and it's like it's partially about that it's important for me to make a thing and share a thing. I think it's part of a creative process, but also it's like it doesn't matter. It's like it doesn't matter if it's I don't have the wisdom here. I don't know what the right words are.
That's
I just
totally
do
fine.
it. Like, and I think that's the only thing that I tell people that want to do things is to just fucking do them and do it more and do it 100 times more. And like in 3 months, in 3 years, be critical, but you have to make the things first before you can't push the brakes and the gas at the same time. Push the gas. Write, paint, draw, do. Put it to the side. But if you like are critical of what you're doing as you're doing, you're dead in the water. It's stupid. Like, and that's what we're taught. We're taught to be critical all the time. It's like, fucking stop being critical. Make shit.
Yeah.
There's my words of wisdom.
It's good. It's good. Coming back to some of the self that I pull from you, or at least, admire whether it directly impacts my narrative of moving forward or not. I'm sure it does. But, I want to ask you a little bit more about pulling the best out of people. Because with regard to sort of the courageousness, the fearlessness to just do and progress as it will, I see you pull out of people as a conductor. Can you talk a little bit more about like being the conductor who's pulling the best, because right, I just about said best self, but maybe the favorite selves out of people?
I think like, I like the idea of being a conductor, but I don't think that like word doesn't necessarily resonate to me, because I feel like a conductor is like got some bigger structure that like putting people into place to do things like together. I don't know that I actually do that well or that often, but I do think that like I think I just like hold a flashlight up to people and say like, that thing over there that you're scared of, like that's the thing. I see it, you see it, there's a flashlight on it, now fucking do it. Like, it's like it's been there the whole time, but like somebody in our lives, like for all of us at some point in time said like, that's stupid, or don't do that, or made us feel shitty about the thing that's actually our heart. And then we like start hiding our heart a little. And then we start walking with a limp, like creatively or mentally, like, and then we're like, oh, and then we get arthritis. And then we're like, and then we're 25 years old and we're old, our hearts are old. And they're like kind of rotten and they're twisted. And we're like, and I'm just like, no, go back to the thing that you were. And I think that's like,
well, maybe more comfortable than conductor is instigator.
Yeah.
Of idle lives.
Fuck yeah. I think that people are like, I think that thing about hearts is like people die. Like creatively, and like their hearts die. And then they like this is what we're taught in school. It's what we're taught like by culture, by Instagram, by all these things of like I knew people that are 20 years old that are, in my mind, they're dead. And then I know people that are 80 years old that are the most alive people in the world. And it's like, just because they're not scared of who they are, or they're not scared of failing, or they're not scared of, like they're curious. Like we gotta pull these things out of our bodies and our hearts and we gotta put them on the table so we can look at them. It's like, we can't look at them inside, we can't see inside. And it's like, we gotta, and then I think once it's out, then we can like see, we can see what our quote unquote best or favorite parts are, and we can identify them and say, this is a part that I like, this is a part that I don't, this is a part that I want more of, this is a path I want to go down more. So I think that, yeah.
So I'm interested in the sort of the critic, and like what role do they have in, I mean, because I think the way I've understood you is basically when you open yourself up and it's critical, that can shut you down.
Totally.
But we live in a world of a bunch of people who all they like to do, I mean, it's just cultural norm to fling shit, right? And to nitpick and all that type of stuff. So how does one protect themselves beyond surrounding themselves with people, like you?
I think you have to choose when you want to be prepared for criticism and what you want criticism for. I think it's choice. Criticism by choice is different than criticism like unwarranted. So if or when you choose to share what you're doing, you have to expect criticism. It always happens, right? But I think that's part of the creative process. But I think it's a part, and I think it happens in a succession where it's like being creative has to live in a space that's outside the bounds of criticism. Like you can't dig for gold unless you're digging. Like you can't be like, well, that little bit of stone right there, that's not gold, so I'm not gonna dig there. Because there might be gold behind it. Right? We have to we gotta dig, and then when we see the gold, we're like, okay, well, we got gold now. We know there's gold here. We know what the fuck gold is. Okay, well now let's polish the gold. And those are like distinct different choices. And it's an important process, but it's a process that can't happen all at once. It just ties people up and gets bound up, and it stifles creativity. It smothers it. It suffocates it. If those things happen too fast, it doesn't work.
So is that because in that metaphor, basically, if we pay attention to the critic while trying to produce, we're never going to find gold that way?
Totally. It's pushing the gas and the brakes at the same time. You don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
You can spin the wheels. So it's pointless. I think it's just about time. It's like people compress it. And I say you can't do it in the same day. That's what I say. If you're gonna create something today. Do not think about it until tomorrow. Yeah. And tomorrow is the soonest time that you can be critical. But you can't be critical in the same day. Make. Tomorrow if your mind is right and you're ready for it and you say, okay, I want to analyze this. I want to find the parts that I like. I want to find my favorite parts. I want to look for, you're still digging for gold. It's being critical. But really what you're saying is like, let's sort the pile. Where's the gold and what's not? Okay, well that's the gold. Cool. Okay. Then you move on to the next sorting. But in the same day, it's impossible. And I think also oftentimes it's like in the same year, it's also not possible. So I think about like turning the scale of time up and down, but when people try and do it in the same moment, like what are we doing? Like,
how do you suppose, coming back to that question of your early days of making, doing, and not, sharing, was that sort of, I guess I'm just wondering how that relates strongly or not that strongly back to the idea of like you gaining that muscle, because it seems like a lot of people will never start. I mean, everyone sucks when they start something, right?
of course.
And they'll never get even notionally better if they don't have certain obliviousness to looking for gold.
How many gold miners find gold the first time they stick a hammer into the fucking rock?
Yeah.
0. Like, why do we expect to be good at something until we've done it? Like,
Yeah.
How? What basketball player won a championship before they shot 9 million free throws? Like, why do we think that creativity is different? It's not lightning striking. It is. You want to be a professional athlete? You train for your whole life, every fucking day, and you track what you're eating and when you're sleeping and what you're doing. Like, it is deliberate.
Yeah.
It's a choice. Like, do you want to make art? Do you want to be creative? Do you want to open up this channel into your heart and your soul and your body and connection to everything in the world? If you want that, well, here's how you do it. You take one step in that direction. You take another step in that direction. You take another step in that direction. It's like, it takes time. It takes practice.
So building the space, the vehicle, the body, in this idea of the sports star or high-end athlete, it's not until you've put in a certain amount of time that you can actually play at the level that your heart was meant to play at.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah.
And that can happen, like, for every single person is different. Like, and so, like, we're all taught different things in different ways. Like I feel like I was taught, or I learned a lot by seeing the wrong ways to do things. Like, I saw the wrong way to do things and I was like, well, I know that that's the wrong way. I don't know what the right way is, but I'm not gonna do that. Like, if this is the wrong way, I'm gonna go the other direction. And I think that's where my method came from. It was really like, it was just saying, like, I know that the right way is somewhere over there and I'm gonna go try and find it. Like, I'm gonna go walk. I'm gonna walk for 1,000,000 miles. Some people are taught the right ways. And like, there's this new soccer player on the Spanish soccer team. He's just turned 17 years old. He scored the most amazing goal. He's 17 years old, playing at the highest level. Like, how did he get there faster? Well, maybe he got shown the right ways. Maybe he had some other skills, maybe whatever. But like, not to say that, like, I think that the learning can happen generationally, right? So part of it is like, run away from a bad thing, or it could be like, well, I had a group of people, or not me, but like a person had a group of people that were creative and supportive from a very early age, from their parents. And then they grew up that way, and then they had kids, and did that again. Like, that compresses time. Like, I'm almost 44, and I'm mad that I didn't learn these things when I was younger. Like, I had to spend 20 years of my life figuring these things out, and it's like, I feel like a newborn baby right now. I'm just like, I feel like I've got like comfort and confidence that I've never had before, and like like, I don't care, like I don't want to say nonchalance, but like I'm not worried about the critical parts of things anymore, and like, that's like, I feel like born again, like,
Yeah.
because those voices aren't holding me back. So for every person, it's different, and there's no right time or wrong time. It just is. It is what it is. We're dealt a certain hand of cards. Some are good, some are bad. We're the luckiest people that have ever walked the face of the earth. So that card is already pretty awesome. I've never not eaten in my life by choice, or like not by my choice. Like, I've never had to be in a war. Like, we're the fucking luckiest people. And if we don't make art, who the fuck's gonna do it? This is why all these people did all these things for so many generations. Like we're giving the middle finger to all the past generations that did harder shit than we have to do by not making art.
Yeah, I think like if I can come back to, you know, one of the first questions you asked me that I think this conversation has helped inform a little bit on how I even think about best versus favorite. You know, I mean, I think I was talking a little bit earlier about best, you know, having this sort of this association with prescription from others and, you know, cultural norms. And, you know, I would love to hear a little bit more on the relationship to the way, whether it's here at the farm or just in your philosophy of living and making and doing, which you said you had not quite a nonchalance or a cavalierness, but I would say probably a confidence in the fact that you are seeking your favorite self. And I just want to know if that's true, and where you stand on that versus you know your best, because I'm guessing somewhere in your career you were more focused on being the best by other people's definition.
Well, and I think that's where it really comes down to, like, this is where like the poetry of the words is so important. Like, who's defining best? Like, is it me thinking that I'm my best, or is it me thinking that other people think I'm being my best, right? I think that's what you're like talking about, huh?
But I mean, sorry, if I just say, like, I think that's an interesting question about who's defining best, because if we define best as this way, which is seeking excellence, which is seeking mastery, which is having reverence for what came before us, and seeking novelty in future times, like, maybe that is good. That's a good definition of best. But I think there's just something so simple about saying your favorite, because favorite is just like, I fucking love a peach and the juice dripping down my forearm. That's my favorite feeling of the summer. Like, that's clear, you know what I mean? I want to read you something real quick.
Yeah.
That's about a very meta idea about showing up today and not being frightened to do this.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I had 3 poems ready for you if one didn't last long enough, you know what I mean? But this one's called Tightrope Artists Afraid of Heights. Try curb walking. It is pretty easy not to lose balance and to fall. Magically raise that curb off the ground to an elevation of 10 feet and then to 50 feet. It gets extremely difficult. I bet to feel confident that you will not fall. But nothing changed about you, your shoes, your balance, the curb width or texture. All that changed is the consequence. If I fall, it will hurt much more. Remember to practice with low stakes and gently remind yourself as you raise the stakes that while the consequences change, the risk is constant.
The consequences change, but the risk is constant. Isn't the risk tied to the consequences, though?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The key component of this poem is no, because the risk of me falling off the curb is the same if I'm high in the air or low, but the consequence of falling at 50 is a lot greater than falling at 6 inches.
Yeah.
And this idea came from Alex Honnold, the free solo climber, where people were asking him, saying, like, why do you take this risk? He's like, well, it's actually high consequence, which is if I fall, I die. But it's low risk because I practice my ass off. And I know he ran that route, El Capitan, many times with ropes, did every hold that he knew. And so basically in his mind, the risk wasn't negligible. But again, the point is that depending on, I mean, so that was the sort of risk consequence idea that linguistically I had never thought of before. Then I applied it to this, which is, you know, simply like, I'm coming out here, we're going on video, audio. We have conversations all the time that we adore. I've cherished before. I believe you're a good conversationalist. I believe I'm a good conversationalist. What has changed is the fucking, you know, data collectors. That's the only thing that's different. And I think as we went along, I mean, pretty early on, it was pretty comfortable, but that's what I had to remind myself of a couple of things. But this is just on a meta level of me creating a podcast with Shay, right? Which is that it's easy for me to get super critical, to worry about, well, what if we have nothing to say? What if he doesn't say anything after this poem? What if I flub this, or who the fuck knows? But that again is just because the consequence is higher, which is, we might have bad footage, but again, I don't worry when I'm out at a bar with you that we're gonna have a bad conversation. Right. We just talk.
Right.
So that's what that poem means to me.
Okay, that poem and that explanation made me think of something.
Yeah.
That's about this poem. And it's about the way that, like, I don't know how to tie it back, but the idea is like, the consequences and the risk and the whatever, it's like, the idea of like having nothing to lose, like, oh, I've got nothing to lose, or I've got nowhere to fall, or whatever. But it's also like, if you, like, I like to say you have everything to lose. Like, if you don't try, then you lose a future.
Yeah.
Right? And so like, there is, let's say there's a world, you know, there's a lot of potential futures. One of them is that like, podcast is awesome. And 10 years from now, you're doing the 450th episode of a podcast. That never would have happened if you didn't try the first one. So I like to think about like, oh, I have everything to lose all the time. And
not doing something. Yeah.
And not I have nothing to lose, or like I only did it because I had nothing to lose. It's like, no, I did it because I had everything to lose. Like,
yeah.
So there's more, to me, there's more energy to do the thing because like, what if it works?
Right.
Like,
but I think what you're getting at with consequence there, if we put away the semantics for a second and just say like, with consequence, there is a consequence to me wasting, like coming out, this is the way I feared, right? As any person who's a person does, potentially, unless they're reprogrammed and brain cleaned. I say, well, I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna waste Victor's fucking time.
how?
No, I don't need you to say no, but like, just listen. So like, basically, I'm just worried that like, what is the consequence of this being bad? That. How likely is that, like, what's the risk of that happening? Not that likely. And even if it does happen, maybe that consequence is worth like going for, because the other consequence of not doing it, to your point, is so fucking terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's the way we have to think of these things, is really like, you know, balancing consequence versus consequence. I fall on my face versus my heart withers away and I die a sad fucking soul.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's what I'm getting from.
Exactly. Totally.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So as someone who's listened to this episode as many times as you have, what do you feel when you hear it all the way through?
I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I like listening to people talk. And this is such a minimally edited conversation. You really kind of not only get to listen to the content of a conversation, you get to listen to like how a conversation can and arguably should be had. You know what I mean? Like you were saying about like, we were just talking before we hit record about how with this podcast generally you would sort of set a tone with the poem, which is generally how it's how the podcast starts. You read a poem and then the guest runs with it and you follow them. And like you're being led in a lot of ways, which is interesting because you could look at the podcast as you leading, but the experience is the opposite. And I think that's, if you're being led, I'm sure as shit being led by the conversation.
Yeah. I should probably tell the listeners who you are. And so Shay Stifelman is a friend of mine and a good friend and a good collaborator. We work on a variety of different things. And what happened in early June was this proposition of me asking him if he wants to be involved in a podcast. Mm-hmm. And then we came up with what that podcast was. And of course, it was very much in line with the sort of right-sized nature of how we do anything. And Shay is a producer of the podcast. He is the videographer, creative director, video editor, and musical score maker, scorist.
Score. I like scorist.
High score. High praise for high score. But anyway, Shay does all these things and ultimately supports me and my ambitions to be front of house, and ultimately gives me quite a long leash. Mm-hmm. So welcome, Shay.
I appreciate the leash you give me as well. No, man, I appreciate it. I appreciate the intro. The music's a fun thing to think about. I forgot about that until we brought it back up.
Yeah, and that's actually where I wanted to go next, is just tell us a little bit more about what your fingerprints are on this this podcast. It's very clear what I'm doing. It's less clear what you're doing overtly to the fans and listeners.
Generally speaking, I'm like a light touch editor with all the work I like to do. Like I like to try and set up situations where there's minimal editing required afterwards, which I think we do a pretty good job with this podcast. So there's like very little actual time edits when it comes to the podcast. My fingerprints are more overt, which is the music underneath a good bit of the conversation, which I like to think of as a musical co-host of sorts, which is to say, like when you're sitting around a fire with your friends, the fire, I think, is definitely taking up the role of like one of the people in the conversation that you're having around the fire, because it fills in the gaps and it allows you time to think and sort of characterizes the silence.
Yeah.
And so that's what a lot of, like, I found myself not wanting to cut out long pauses with these kinds of conversations. And so the music does sort of, it's like anti-cutting. It's like anti-editing. Just add something where you could cut things out.
But why do you want to keep the
pauses?
If only to, like, okay, now you got a place to put music and that's fun, but there's something to the pause. Right?
Sure. Yeah, when I was initially editing, I did the thing that I normally do when I'm a video editing. You know what I mean? When I'm editing a shorter piece of content, which is just take out long pauses. And there's a lot happening in those pauses, especially in a conversation like this, so free flowing. And that's so kind of right on the edge of what a conversation can be, because we're talking around poetry. And so taking out the pauses made the conversation feel completely different and wrong to me. Like, it made it feel like a different conversation.
Yeah.
But adding some sweeping something or some little building sound or hiss or hum or something like that can kind of characterize that thought, maybe, that's growing in the mind of whoever's paused.
Yeah. It's interesting because I thought of hot tubs when you said fire, because the same thing that happened at the fire pit happened in the hot tub. I used to actually work for a hot tub company back in Ohio. Like, when you're just sitting in the hot tub, if you were just sitting this close to that many people in nearly your underwear and there was no hot tub, it wouldn't work.
It would not work.
And so I love that. I love that analogy to the fire.
Musical hot tub.
Musical hot tub. Yeah.
I'll take that.
Yeah. So the format of the podcast is that it's always going to be free to listen to. And that free audio version that you're consuming on Spotify or Apple or Stitcher or whatever, that will remain ad-free and will be the quality that you heard here today. Quality and content with guests and audio production. We have gated content that is essentially stuff that didn't make it in, and stuff that's really valuable. We imagine it's worth your money to invest a small fee per month through Patreon. We'll put the link for the Patreon if you'd like to subscribe there. We'd love to have you. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.